Welcome everybody to SourceBreaker's data-driven approach to winning new business. We're going to give it a minute or two just for people to jump on, get good volume of people in, and then we will get started. Just while we're doing that, we'll do some introductions. So me, first of all, I'm Steve. I'm the founder of SourceBreaker. Set the business up about 7 or so years ago, having spent a number of years at a global staffing agency. And now with SourceBreaker, founded 7 years ago. And on to Adam Winston.
Hi guys, I'm Adam, VP of Sales at SourceBreaker. Been with the company pretty much since day one. Been tasked with new business. So in terms of what we're going to be discussing today, that's always been my focus. But from SourceBreaker's perspective, obviously we're going to be talking about it from a staffing agency perspective as well. So we work with some amazing clients. We've got 2 of which joining us today. Adam Sprecher from Salo and Tom Schmidt from Staffmark Group. So handing over to you guys.
Thanks, Adam and Steve. Excited to be here. Adam Sprecher with Salo. We're a talent organization focused in the finance and HR verticals. In my role as Vice President of Strategy Development, I focus on our growth initiatives and the different strategies, technologies, and platforms that are going to propel and enable those growth strategies. And SourceBreaker has been a great addition to our tech stack and ability for us to do some new things, and excited to share more about that today.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, Tom. Hi, everybody. Excited to be here, too. Thanks for the invite, Steve and Adam. Tom Schmidt, Senior Vice President for Staffmark Group. I lead our technical and professional services brands for Staffmark Group in the U.S. and Canada. That's basically IT and engineering, finance and accounting, creative and marketing, corporate services within the staffing arena. Blessed to work for a global technology leader in Recruit Holdings and a global staffing leader in RGF Staffing. Staffmark Group fits under the RGF Staffing umbrella. RGF Staffing is the number 4 firm by revenue in the world. Locally, Staffmark Group or in the U.S. and Canada, a really, really great firm, very positive, team-focused culture, great mix of performance and people culture. Blessed to work with a great team of folks in my organization, driving the vision forward, enjoying every minute of that. My background, I've been in the industry for just about 25 years. Time flies. I was preparing for this call and I realized it was nearly 25 years, and it's very interesting to think about that. Various groups and lines of business in my experience over time. Started in tech in the business, and I'm back in tech. National sales, global leadership, executive management roles since then. Before the industry, I really started my career in business development. I was very fortunate to have a couple of great teachers early on in my career and set a strong foundation for me. And I really believe that business development is as valuable a career path as it is today as it was back then. So certainly happy to be here. Love the topic and looking forward to the conversation. So thanks.
Fabulous. Thanks very much, Tom. And thank you, Adam. So to give you guys a little bit of an overview about who we are, who SourceBreaker is. So we're an AI-driven candidate search, match, and lead generation technology for staffing agencies. Told by Bullhorn themselves that we are their fastest growing marketplace partner ever, and a couple of other accolades that we're very, very proud of. The Financial Times, which is the European equivalent to the Wall Street Journal, listed on their 1,000 fastest growing companies in consecutive years. As a business, we started life very much as a candidate search platform, and we still help thousands of agencies on the candidate search side of things. So anybody needs any assistance in that area, that is an area of specialization for us and somewhere we can help. But today we're actually going to focus on the business development side of things and how we can hopefully give you some really good ideas, some good takeaways in terms of business development methodologies from a very much a data-driven perspective. In terms of client partnerships, some of the people that we work with, lots of household names that you'll be aware of, people like Hayes, Manpower, Kelly, later in the year, Allegis as well, and a number of other very fast growth agencies in between, and some of the smaller agencies as well. So really, agencies of any kind of size, we're able to support and have done over the last few years or so. Okay.
We'd like to start off here with a quick Slido poll. So this is an opportunity for you guys, the audience, to get involved. Over the years, everyone understands the difficulties associated with sourcing candidates. And as Steve said, SourceBreaker is an area a technology that can help you with it. So Over the years, and especially last year with COVID changing the market, business development is becoming more and more important for everyone we speak with. It's opened up the potential for diversification, new territories and industries and so on. So we wanted to understand from our audience how important BD is to your organization. For those of you that aren't familiar with Slido, if you just take out your smartphone, open the camera and hold it over the QR code, it will take you to Slido where you can complete the poll and we can see what sort of results we get from people.
Thanks, Adam. Okay, so out in front we have at the moment, a BD is a priority. It's a salesperson-led strategy that we have in place. Organisation-led at the top as well. Okay, so all coming in pretty close. Fortunately, no one so far doesn't have a strategy, and BD is not a priority for anybody, which is fabulous to see. This would probably be a pretty pointless webinar to join if BD wasn't in any way a priority. So some reassuring results to see there. And good to see most businesses have a strategy in place, either led by individual salespeople or led by their organisation. So we'll give another few seconds for any further answers to come through. But yeah, some interesting responses so far there. Excellent. Good stuff. Okay, so we have one where BD isn't a priority. You may want to jump off now, but hopefully by watching this webinar, it might turn into a priority for you when you see some really good content that's going to be useful for your business. Okay, right, let's move on. Oh, no, they've gone. It's now back to being a priority. There we go. Fabulous. Okay. So what we're going to talk about today is our hot, warm and cold methodology, and then also trigger events. So I'm going to go through what exactly we mean by hot, warm and cold, and then we'll talk about trigger events as well. And we're going to get some great contributions from Tom and Adam along the way as well. Okay, so first to talk about hot prospects. So a hot prospect is a client that your agency's placed with within the last 12 or 18 months. So this is an organisation that you would expect all of their vacancies, all of their job opportunities should technically come to you, or almost all of those. Now, where these organisations can be really turbocharged in terms of the revenue you're able to generate from them is one, being able to diversify into that client. So you may be working in a particular area and you want to diversify into a new part of that business, or alternatively, you want to make sure you're getting access to all of the opportunities before everybody else. So one of the things that we would strongly recommend is setting up alerts, so email alerts for vacancies to be taken direct from the employer. Now, the reason why that's really, really important is because in many cases, you might be on a preferred supply list with a organisation, or you might think you get released all of their roles, all of their job opportunities. The reality can actually be quite different, but you never actually realise it. And a really good example of that is one of our key customers, Hayes. They set up an alert for an organisation that they were on the preferred supply list with and expected to get all of their vacancies. What actually happened was all of the vacancies would go onto that company's own careers page, their own careers website. They'd be advertised for 2 weeks just on that site, and then they would release the roles to agencies after that. So by setting up those alerts for those existing customers, they were able to get a 2-week head start on everybody else, so that when the roles were actually released to them, they were able to get candidates put forward to that customer ahead of all of the other staffing agencies that were potentially going to be competing with them on those roles. Another key benefit to doing that as well is if they're hiring into other divisions that you don't necessarily receive all of the vacancies for, but you want to fill those roles, you'll get notified about roles that would otherwise not necessarily be on your radar. And it just gives you the opportunity again to penetrate that business more deeply and increase the amount of revenue you're able to generate from that particular customer. Okay, and then also important to think about is placing head of roles. So getting alerts for roles at a senior level that might not necessarily, again, be released to you typically. We've seen a number of different cases where people will fill at the doer level, so an engineer level or an accountant level, but won't necessarily receive the VP, the director type roles. By being alerted to those roles, it gives you the opportunity to try and win that business. And then naturally, once you've won that business, you've got a far higher chance of being notified about those roles direct from the person that you've placed, the roles that will be coming in underneath that person following their hiring. Okay, we'll move on to warm prospects. So warm prospects are organisations that you've had actions with in the last, say, 12 to 18 months. So that could be the occasional placement, it might be interviews, they might have given you the opportunity to work on one of the jobs that they're trying to hire for, but it's not a rock solid relationship. that they're going to come to you every single time that they're hiring. But what they may well do is if you're able to put a phone call into them, they'll get in touch with you. They're happy to speak to you and give you those roles to work on. So a really good thing to do here is to use Bullhorn to identify warm prospects. So run a report on all organizations where you've previously had jobs, previously had interviews, but don't necessarily get access to all of those jobs. That way, you're able to then set up alerts, get notified about any new hires that they've got happening direct from their careers page, and it gives you the ability to understand their hiring plans, a bit more on their business strategy by seeing exactly what they're hiring for. Now, this is where you can get some really, really impressive wins, because these are organizations that you're a phone call away from being able to get them to work with you, but they don't necessarily think to come to you every time. And we see huge amounts of revenue missed in this particular area. And a really good example, another one of our customers, the S3 Group, they set up an alert for an organization that they had interviews with but hadn't placed with for quite some time. They got notified about the role. They were able to contact the hiring manager directly and get working on that role and make a significant placement now. It was a $150,000 salary, so a very significant fee for them. And the only reason they were aware of that is because they'd set that structure up, targeted their warm prospects, and been notified about those roles there. So what we'd like to do, pass on to Adam to engage with Adam, Sprecher, and Tom, just on your insights around this kind of setting a strategy.
Yes, I think the opportunity to speak, obviously, with our panel, our experts about this, about their experience of new business and technology. From my personal perspective, I think a really good idea here is to work with independent technology consultants. Some people on the call may be aware of Lauren Jones. I've worked with her previously. Lauren has an unbelievable understanding of the whole technology landscape. Her knowledge of every single solution out there is unbelievable. But when Lauren comes into a business to understand about that client, to see what their current process is, what their objectives are, what their pain points are, and so on, and her understanding and experience of implementing different technologies previously is a great way to try and figure out what the right solution is for your company. Adam, I know that was the way that you and I met in the first place as well, but it would be really good to understand from your perspective how you guys go about approaching your business development strategy.
Yeah. So a couple of things that we've done on our business development side is make sure that each of our business development directors, has a really focused set of accounts that they're going after, and making sure that they continuously are aware of what's going on inside those organizations. So whether or not they've had a recent placement, they have maybe a consultant currently engaged with that assignment, right? We expect and look for them to really be fully aware up and down the organization of the things that are going on in that organization, the changes that are happening, the hiring that's making, the other business activities and triggers that are there. And we've seen a ton of success in a short period of time because, we've been live with SourceBreaker now for, the better part of 2 months. And that is something that our teams now can automate for themselves. So instead of having to either go to multiple different sources or be able to track information on their own, SourceBreaker, through the use of different searches and source bots, that they can target those specific set of accounts, they can stay super focused, is bringing them daily real-time information on job postings that then they can ultimately take action on. And whether that's just a call to inquire, ultimately potentially pitch a potential consultant candidate, but generate more business. So the automation and the focus that SourceBreaker has introduced for our business development team has been a huge boost of activity. And again, in competitive times as they are right now with tight talent and the market moving quickly, every minute, every hour that you get information ahead of your competition, it does make a difference.
Yeah, I'll add a few thoughts to that on what it takes to build a strong strategy. I think for us, sort of going more at a high levels to start, I think you have to know yourself as an organization. Before you even begin the strategy, you have to know what your firm is good at, where your value lies in the marketplace based on those competencies and capabilities, your assets, what your vision is. You got to set a clear picture for where the company is going to go. As you sort of drive into your strategy, one step below vision is strategy. In our view, you don't want to be all things to all people. There's a great book I would recommend to everybody called Playing to Win. It's written by a couple of folks, Lafley and Martin. Lafley was CEO of P&G. Martin was a high-level business consultant. They talk a lot about making good choices, making the right choices, And one of their chapters is called Where to Play, and it really helps you sort of frame up, what is best for you to sort of focus on versus being all things to all people. When you're talking about building your strategy down to the local level, building a plan, territory sales planning can be simple. It can be complex. Every rep needs to have a plan of some sort. You want to work smarter and not harder. Those can vary. Certainly, if it's a simple retail sales role, it can be a very simple plan. If they're solution selling roles in the national or global space, maybe more complex. But building a plan is certainly an important part of getting your arms around and driving the strategy down into the business. A critical part of building that plan is to identify. We've talked about identifying and prioritizing targets. I really like the framework, Steve, that you set up, the sort of hot, cold, or cold, warm, and hot. It helps you sort of test your targets, test your priorities within that target list. The who, what, where, how much, where your sales folks are going to spend time is really, really important. I think also, to figure out those priorities, you have to have good, strong research up front. Sometimes it's tough to convince a sales rep to invest the time up front on research. But it's worth its weight in gold down the line. You sort of slow down to speed up in your sales process. And so building that research, taking time to build that research and optimizing your target list is going to be really key, in our opinion, for the success of any rep. And to do that research, you need great tools. And certainly SourceBreaker has been a great tool for us, great sources of information. Again, I think somebody already mentioned it. Steve mentioned that Source and Match might be primary to their platform. That's certainly why I was first interested. And Adam, you mentioned Lauren Jones. I have to thank her publicly for introducing us to you. And I'm glad you mentioned her name, because everything you said, I am certainly 100% in on as well. But you want reps to be building plans that they can believe in, that are going to be productive for themselves, and not something that's sort of deployed on high from a distance. Walking in their shoes is really, really important. So know yourself, build a good plan, use research to do it, and use tools to build your research. Those are my initial thoughts on the subject.
Thanks very much, guys. Yeah, very interesting thoughts there. Adam, are we moving on to a Slido question?
Another opportunity to have the audience involved here. So we've spoken about hot and warm leads. Moving on to cold leads. So these are businesses that we haven't had any interactions with whatsoever so far. So we're trying to get our foot in the door. What we want to understand here is where you guys find your leads from, what sources you find that information from, how do you identify the companies hiring. So again, if you pull out your smartphone and scan a QR code, you'll have the opportunity to answer this question for us here as well. And in terms of the initial results that we've got coming through, we're getting lots of people saying that they're using LinkedIn and job boards to find this information. This seems to be the traditional method of doing things when it comes to new business. When I'm speaking with my prospects and clients and they're looking for cold business, they're trying to identify new opportunities. Everyone's looking at LinkedIn and Indeed or different job boards and so on as well. It's obviously a great method for finding this information, but recruitment's competitive. If you're finding your leads on LinkedIn and Indeed, then the chances are your competitors are going to be finding the same leads as well. So what we want to try and do is try and identify other opportunities that aren't being found by so much of the competition. So we'll give a chance to see how many more results we get coming through here, and then Steve's going to talk to us about cold prospects and some of the ways that we can go about doing that as well.
Fabulous, thanks, Adam. And yeah, I think the data that we're seeing here is very much in line with what we would typically expect. I think for a recruiter and for a business development professional, time is short. There's high targets. There's very little time to complete the activities that are needed. And going to places like LinkedIn, where there's a rich source of information, and job boards such as Monster is the obvious and the easy route, and it's an effective route. But really important to think about how you can differentiate from the other thousands of recruiters that will be doing the same thing as well, and how you can get to other information that's potentially going to be separate from the rest of the market and give you the opportunity to win good quality business with high margins that not everybody else is fighting over as well. Fantastic. So the cold prospects, so no doubt everybody would have worked out very quickly and easily exactly what we mean by cold prospects. So we've spoken about the hot and the warm, and the cold prospects will be companies that we've never had any interaction with. They are completely cold businesses to us, but that we're interested in working with. And what we see all too often is that people will target almost any company that hires for their particular niche or niche, I should say, as we're here in America. So hiring in that particular area, rather than really thinking hard about what are the best companies for me to be prospecting that mean that I'm going to have my candidates incredibly interested in working in those businesses. As we all know, there's a huge shortage of candidates out there. So we want to make sure when we're speaking to those high quality candidates, we're able to put the best opportunities in front of them as well. So making sure that all of the targets you're going after are high quality companies, and improve the engagement with those leads by finding leads your competitors aren't. So finding leads that aren't sat on LinkedIn, that aren't sat on Monster, but you can get, for example, direct from a corporate website that aren't actually being published anywhere else, or funding data as well. So identifying when a company is taking funding and then being able to get to those businesses before they're proactively hiring. So over again to the experts, enough of me talking on there. Adam and Tom, it'd be great to hear your insights on how you guys go about approaching winning cold business.
Yeah, well, I think, one of the key things that you called out, Steve, that is super important, right, is, you got to inform yourself, have data, have information, right? I think, in any kind of selling capacity, in any kind of service business today, just the pure cold call, hey, I've got people, that we know that doesn't work. It doesn't resonate with clients or individuals that even if they have a need. And so the ability to inform yourself and have information, have data that then you can use in creating some sort of a value exchange, that is critical in developing relationships and ultimately winning business. And so the ability to say, what information do I need? What's going to be relevant? And how do I best use that information and position it in establishing a connection and creating a value exchange? That has, over the last, handful of years, but even, coming post-COVID here, going to continue to increase as importance. And so we look for and encourage our business development director to say, what is a nugget of information? What is something that you can use when making that initial outreach, right? So whether it's initial LinkedIn email or Outlook email or even a voicemail, what is something that you can use to say, this is a reason for us to connect, right? It's not just we've got great talent. It's not just we can help meet your business needs. There has to be something where that other person on the other end goes, I don't know you, but I'm willing to engage with you now. And so equipping yourself and surrounding yourself with that real-time, market-relevant information to create that value exchange, again, it's an all-time high and just is going to become more important. And so having tools and platforms like a SourceBreaker that can automate that, bring that to you, help ease the activity and workload of a business development person of having to find that and track that down so they can just readily have that available and then go do that work. That is where you will see a ton of success and probably increase in not just activity, but also winning business and building more long-lasting client relationships.
Yeah, and for me, Steve, I think much of what Adam just said, I think is in my notes here, so I'll try to adjust. But I think the most important things are, if you're assigned a number of cold prospects onto your target list and your manager says, hey, these are logo targets for you, we want you to make sure that they're on your list. You're always going to want to have a mix. Any good rep's going to want to have a mix of warm, cold, warm, and hot recs. Every cold lead they want to make warm. So the first objective of any good rep is to find a way to warm them up and warm up their market in general. And I talked about research earlier, I think, and that's exactly what Adam was just talking about, making sure you've got good sources of data, good sources of information to, you don't want to your reps don't want to be walking down Main Street all the time, right? The crowds, following the crowds to the same targets, that's completely inefficient. Far more challenging than it needs to be, and so we want to give them the unbeaten path to those targets. And just as Adam said, I think making sure that you're giving them as many tools as possible to warm up their lead base, and tools like SourceBreaker. I'm going to probably mention it every slide, but one of the really interesting parts about SourceBreaker is there are some unique aspects to particular pockets of data that are very interesting, that some of them we don't have from any other source. So that is certainly great. But those teams have to leverage those tools and reinforce. We as leaders have to reinforce the fact that they need to take the time to warm up those cold leads, before they make contact and engage. So I know, Steve, you have something. SourceBreaker has something called trigger events. I know we're going to talk about that. It's a fascinating phrase. It's a great phrase. And I think that's really what we're talking about here, is what are those trigger events that are going to get a rep on a cold prospect to act.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's jump on to that then. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Adam. So what is a trigger event? So a trigger event is a reason to call. It's a piece of data that separates that business from just any business that you might call because they hire for the skill set that you guys might recruit for. It creates an opportunity for a sale. So some examples could be things like funding data, decision makers. And again, I would defer to the experts, Adam and Tom, for their thoughts on the kinds of trigger events that are interesting for their business development team, because they know that that's going to be a good quality prospect for them.
Tom, why don't you take the lead on this one?
Okay, no problem. Thanks. So I think there are a number of things that we would be looking for. People news. There's an old solution selling mantra called that says, when people change, everything can change. New decision makers make new decisions, and your business can change dramatically if you're not following that closely. So company news, news reports on hiring events, PR statements, 10Ks, annual reports, anything that's going to give you some insight. And again, some of these things are maybe overkill for an entry-level field-based BDM, but depending on the complexity of the role, you're always looking for information about these companies. M&A activity, certainly, if you've got one of your current clients acquires another company, or vice versa. Those are opportunities for new business opportunity. The other is, whenever you have mergers, M&A activity going on, you're going to have talent redundancies, and you might really have an opportunity to take some quality talent out of one of those firms and redeploy them somewhere else. Introduce yourself, recruit them, and find them their next home. So those are certainly some of the things. And in your tool in SourceBreaker, there's something called In the News, a functionality called In the News that gives you all those things I just mentioned to stay close, help you stay close and connected. Another is, Steve, you mentioned at the front, new hiring activity, setting up feeds to kind of auto feeds on knowing where that activity is happening, where the action is happening right now from the companies in your target list. I think that's a really important thing. And then when you build your plan, you want to make sure that you've got a good sense for what's in that territory. What are the priorities in that territory? So however you set up the structure for territories for your sales reps, they can use something like the search leads function in SourceBreaker to really figure out how best to prioritize again and help themselves. And then really quickly, the last thing that it's not really a trigger event, but I thought it was a very cool functionality in your tool is the email domains functionality, which, if you're looking, obviously, if you're setting up a cold list, you don't have any names, maybe you certainly don't have contact information, cell phones and email addresses. The email domains functionality helps you sort of uses AI to help figure out what are the best guesses on what that email might be for that target prospect, that target buyer. So really cool. Those are some of the things I think that come to mind for us on some of the things that force us to act.
And a couple of things I would just add. I think what Tom laid out there is really helpful. But being very specific, right? And so again, depending upon your vertical or your geographic market or other pieces about your business, like what are the things that ultimately drive your ability to create business or put people to work? Focusing on those things, and other things in addition to that. And I agree, Tom. The news feed inside of SourceBreaker inside the company's pages are super helpful. We like to also encourage our business development team to focus on trigger events that often aren't the obvious ones. So certainly, people moves, new CEO joins the organization, and M&A activity, that gets a lot of noise. Oftentimes creates a lot of other calls from competition. But things as simple as like an earnings release. right? The amount of information that is produced in an earnings release on a quarterly or annual basis, right? There's tons of information that can be leveraged and used. And what we found a lot of success is oftentimes, right? Hiring managers, they're not even aware of an earnings release, perhaps, or they're not reading the earnings release. And so when you come to the table talking about their organization, being informed about their organization, that could be a differentiator, in your ability, especially in a cold prospect, to get their attention and start to build something. So, trigger events, the size and scale of those, can vary greatly. So just sticking to, what are the trigger events that for your business or your ability to connect with potential clients, cold clients, or even stay engaged with warm and hot clients saying, I know your business, or we understand what's going on there, and this is how we can help. These are great ways to put your team in a better position to stand out and ultimately win business.
Yeah, I agree.
Sorry, Steve, I was just going to say, neither one of us mentioned something that was very attractive to my team right away, which was the funding notifications. So, you've got something that I'd not seen anywhere else, which was a consolidation of new rounds of funding for companies that would hire in the tech space, as an example. And that is a fantastic source. I hope it continues to develop. And right now, it's great. I just, expanding that out to using the same sort of framework would be tremendously valuable going forward. But that's something that impressed every single person who saw the tool when we were making a decision about SourceBreaker. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that too.
Thanks very much, Tom. I appreciate that. I think from the poll that we did earlier, it looked like there's less than 10% of people are actually currently using funding data as a business development tool. I can actually give SourceBreaker itself as a business as a really strong case study for why that is so powerful. So a few years ago, we took about £2.4 million sterling of funding, so it's about $3 million worth of funding. Now that funding was to be used specifically to accelerate our growth. So we use that funding to hire heavily. So we've hired about 20 people into our technology teams. That is a mixture of, permanent staff members, but also contract interim staff members who work for us for a period of anything from 1 to 2 years on significant day rates, a high margin contract. We hired into our finance function, HR, operations, sales, customer success, all off the back of this funding that we took. And one of the important things to bear in mind as well with companies that have been funded, so for SourceBreaker, the metrics that we're measured on by our investors is actually our growth rate. So all they care about is, are we growing our revenue significantly quarter on quarter, year on year? And actually for us as a technology business, profit is of secondary importance at this point. Until we reach scale, profit is less important. So what that means is all of our decisions are focused around how do we grow our revenues as quickly as possible, and profit is just secondary. What that means is we need to get access to the best possible talent, and we need to get access to it fast. That means we're highly motivated to make fast hiring decisions. We're also highly motivated to pay good fees to premium agencies who are able to find us top talent, because we know that top talent, even though it might be a premium price point, that's going to help us hit our revenue growth targets that we need to hit. So funded companies are really, really interesting from the perspective of you can get really good fees from them. They'll hire quickly, but also they'll have a significant volume of hiring because they've taken funding in order to do that. Finally, why funded companies are really, really good to speak to is a company like SourceBreaker. So we're about 5 staff at the moment. If you make a cold call to one of our heads of division, one of our VPs, the chances are you're going to get through to that person. You're going to be able to pick up the phone and actually speak to them, rather than having to go through a talent function or an intermediary that's going to slow down your ability to sell to that business. You can pick up the phone, speak to the CTO, speak to the VP of sales, and then start working with that organization straight away. So really fast, really high margin, and high volumes as well. So it's a really hot part of the market to be going after. And as we saw from the poll today, less than 10% of people, I think it was even potentially less than 5%, less than 10% of people are targeting that at the moment. So it's an unsaturated area to go after as well. So really, really, really strong area to go after, and great technology out there that can help you get to it. So I will move on to the next slide again. Adam, Tom, thank you very much for your thoughts there. Okay. So we've covered the trigger events. We've covered the methodology of how to segment our prospects to make sure that we're going after them in an intelligent and scalable way. How do we now think about automating those processes? So how do you guys industrialize your business development approach?
Yeah, so for us, again, it was not completely automated, right? There was still some automation, but a lot of manual effort, right? And so whether that was setting up multiple different alerts using different platforms, and so whether it was, LinkedIn feeds or Google alerts or other platforms, right? What that, caused was, kind of a continuous bombardment of information flow coming to our business development teams, where as those things would hit, they would go, okay, well, how do I react? What do I do? And so, we tried to simplify it for them to say, okay, what is the most critical information you need to be able to go out to market to start to build relationships, either, deepening relationships with existing client contacts or to create new client contacts. So we really tried to, slim down what is most important and relevant in, the activity that you need to drive and do. And, that's going to be a little bit different, based on the client book of business somebody's managing, their tenure and experience, in the industry or with your organization. So we left it a little open in, saying, okay, from a process standpoint, we all want to kind of follow a similar process, but, creating some flexibility and autonomy to say what's most important to you. But we really do encourage them to get focused on what's that information you're going after. And so whether that's, certain industries, certain size companies, certain geographic markets, have that focus. And now let's say, okay, how do we bring in tools to say, all right, how do you give me this information, right? So that I can go attack this and go to market this way. And again, with the infusion of SourceBreaker here, we've been able to see, again, automating that. One of the biggest pieces is speed. All right, and so having that information real time, not having any kind of significant delays or lags where your competition's got information out ahead of you, by the time you do reach out to that hiring manager, you're the fourth call, right? You want to do everything you can to be that first call, or perhaps be the only call because you're using information that nobody else has. And that is really, I think, one of the game changers. Tom mentioned it earlier. We were also super excited about the funding mechanism. Right now, funding is public information. That's obviously how it's sourced for SourceBreaker, but not everyone's using it, and not everyone knows how to get access to it. So the ability to have access to it and the real-time nature of it, that's a differentiator for you to be able to really quickly connect and reach out. And so speed to market, as we all know, right, that can be a game changer, a game killer, depending on what happens there. So our ability to say, okay, let's focus on what matters most, and let's automate that and create consistency around that, and put yourself in the best position to be out ahead of the market. That is where we want you to play. And that's been something we've, again, started to really benefit and realize in the past 2 months, leveraging the different features within SourceBreaker as well.
Good stuff. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, sure. So for me, my team knows I'm a big believer in designing good process and then leveraging automation in smart spots, right, in places that are really gonna have the greatest impact. I came to this firm 3 years ago, and my mission was to unify 5 brands, 5 mostly disparate brands, all kind of doing their own thing in their own way. Some great things were happening, around the country in those various brands. But the best ideas that were aligned, that were in one business unit, were not being leveraged consistently or shared, that sort of thing. And there's, in all of my units, there's consistency around the typical processes. The same processes will work effectively. The same roles are applied, that sort of thing. And what was interesting is, as it relates to the discussion that we're having right now on data and automation, one of the ways we tied our teams together more effectively was to leverage specific automation, and to do that across units. And sourcing, this could be automation in sourcing, like SourceBreaker, research, business development, employee engagement, administrative tasks, redundant operational tasks, where the question we're asking ourselves is, how do we give our individual contributors, our technical recruiters and our sales teams, our professional recruiters, time back to reinvest in areas that really drive our financials as a company, but their own compensation, and speed up the returns, like Adam just said, speed up the ramp time. as we go through that. I'm lucky. I'll put a little plug into for my organization, Staffmark Group. Over the last 2 years, has invested a significant amount of time and money in automation, in improving our tech stack. And two of our executives, specifically SVP of Operations Emily Giltner and our CIO Forrest Wagner, have been outstanding partners to me and my organization as they've brought ideas to us constantly, and SourceBreaker is certainly one of those. So we are always trying to look for those processes that we can automate, improve the process first, then automate, and then track it, monitor it, report on it. And SourceBreaker's been a really great partner in that regard.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Tom. So I'm just conscious that we're running at the end of time now. So what we'll look to do is just skip through just finally on the last couple of bits. So some thoughts for people. The webinar is going to be recorded, so people can refer back to this and freeze the pain here. But just thinking about how to differentiate from the competition, putting information at your fingertips that helps you separate yourself out. Adam spoke in really good detail around how do you make sure your business development professionals are able to differentiate well. So some thoughts there on how to differentiate. So just to summarize, segment your prospects and your customers, target really high quality prospects, and improve your conversion rates with much better quality data. I think Adam and Tom have been fabulous with giving us some insights there. Any final questions or thoughts from anybody before we wrap up there, guys?
I would just encourage, if you don't have something that's bringing data into your organization and doing it in an automated way, I highly encourage you to explore, how you could potentially do that. Obviously, I'd start with SourceBreaker. It's a phenomenal tool, right? Put the plug in there, full disclosure. But there are a ton of other tools and platforms to kind of baby step into it, right? If you're not ready for kind of the full functionality and the capability that SourceBreaker could bring to your organization, it takes some baby steps. But if you're not doing it today, it is almost a necessity in today's market.
Great.
Yeah, fabulous. And as Adam said, no obligation to go and invest in SourceBreaker. Hopefully, either way, you guys have had some really good takeaways as attendees to think about implementing into your business. And as I mentioned at the start, whether it's the business development side of things or the candidate identification side of things, we're well set to help. So please do get in touch if you'd like to explore any of the thoughts in this any deeper. Okay, I think we have one question. I'm going to try and find it. I can't get access to the Q&A. Adam, Winston, I don't know if you're able to. I'm clicking Q&A and it's not allowing me to.
The question that we've got coming up, thoughts about Zoom Info, asking whether it's something that could be used in collaboration with SourceBreaker. We think Zoom Info is a great tool, really useful for finding personal contact information. Our recommendation here is that SourceBreaker is a great tool for helping you to identify and source your candidates, your decision makers, jobs and opportunities and so on, so we can help you to find those people in the first place. Once you've got those contacts via SourceBreaker, Zoom Info is a great tool for helping you to find the contact details to actually make contact and get in touch with them as well. So yeah, definitely a good tool and something that can be used alongside SourceBreaker. Many of our clients use SourceBreaker and Zoom Info together.
As we do. We use both.
Yeah. Thanks. So other question, does SourceBreaker integrate with eRecruit? So we have a very deep integration with Bullhorn, of which eRecruit is part of that group now. We don't have a direct integration with eRecruit as of today, but there are some fabulous clients that have eRecruit, they have SourceBreaker. There is not a full integration at this point, but that doesn't stop people using it. Over 50% of our customers use SourceBreaker as a standalone platform. So no, it doesn't have to be integrated with the CRM to see fabulous value from it.
I think Tom's a perfect example here. The Staffmark group using eRecruit as their database themselves. So while SourceBreaker doesn't have a full integration with eRecruit, you can use SourceBreaker to search the database. And the feedback is that you very often uncover candidates on that system that you weren't aware you had there because of the way it can help you to do that search in the first place.
Yeah, on the search and match side, really quickly, just to add to that, Adam, practically. On the source match side, building out strings, perfect strings, and then leveraging them in the eRecruit is an advance in our environment. So as is, it already helps the two work together side by side. But our team in our planning over the next months and maybe the next year, we have a plan to integrate the two ourselves. So just because we know that that would speed things up even further. So we'll be doing that, and I'm sure we'll be working closely with SourceBreaker to make sure that we do that well and effectively. So.
And we're getting towards the end. One final question is, how does SourceBreaker compare to Dijkstra? Obviously, there's some similarities. There's also a lot of differences too. Not that we've got time to go into at this stage, but I would be very happy to talk you through the differences. So if anyone does want to explore it in more depth, more than happy to talk with you. So please feel free to get in touch. There's a landing page to set up a demonstration, or feel free to contact me myself as well.
Fabulous. Okay, I think we are out of time now. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining on, and a massive thanks to Adam and Tom for sharing their insights. Two incredibly high-performing businesses. It's great to see their willingness to share how they're doing quite so well. So thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate your time. Yeah, thank you, everybody who joined on as well. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.